you got to be the spiciest thing at that event to make it on some of the reels. Like, you got to be the new post office truck that looks like a weird cartoon alligator to be in the, you can see that?
No, I don't know what you mean.
Oh, well, wow, that I must sound insane.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Open Hardware Manufacturing Podcast, the podcast about making open source hardware. My name is Stephen Hawes.
And I'm Lucian.
And today we're talking about events and going to events, tabling at events, walking around events. Which one should you go to? Why is it beneficial to do it? Oh my gosh, there's no way to tell if we're going to waste money on this. Is it still worthwhile to do it? Blah, 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 blah. All kinds of stuff about going to events and tabling.
Yeah, and Stephen shares a lot of fun war stories from his past jobs working for events.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of stuff that I pulled for. Maybe a little intense for what we need to do because they were mission critical. You cannot fail operations. Little different for this when you're doing it for your own thing, but still a lot of really good lessons learned about how to do events. How do you talk to people? How do you run a booth well? How do you get the most out of the event? It's exhausting and it takes a lot of time to prep for them, but I think they're really worth it depending on the event that you go to.
You should go to one, at least.
Yeah, try it out. Just give it a whirl and see. Even if it's a local event, something like, it's worth it to go and give it a try.
Yeah, they're good for you.
Yeah, they're like vitamins. Take your events. Let's get into it, man.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so before we get into event-specific stuff, let's talk about why it's even worthwhile to go to them.
Yeah, like, what's the point?
What's the point of going to it? Now, out of the gate, it is a very hard thing to calculate your ROI or your return on investment of going to an event.
Right.
Like, it is inherently unknown. It's the same reason that space exploration, in my opinion, is a good use of taxpayer money. Is like, you're going to get things out of it you weren't intending to. Like, Velcro's a pretty lame example, but like, things come out of the space program. Like, It spurs on development, and they're not things you were necessarily going out to get, but you still get a lot of benefit from them.
Yeah, like, we're seeing people reach out and show awareness of the LumenPnP because of an event we went to 2 years ago.
Right.
It can be like a really long-term investment to be at an event and like show yourself there.
Yeah. There's a lot that can come from it, but it's very hard to like have on a profit and loss sheet of like spent X amount for event, made this amount from event, like you can with like advertising.
Right.
Like with an ad, you can say, oh, I put in $1,000 and I made $8. It's like, okay, there's my return. There's an obvious value to spending this money. Events are way more messy. So like, all of this is kind of a little, I don't know.
And like, I think I have to put an asterisk there too, because there's many types of events. If you're just demoing, if you're just showcasing, you're not vending.
Yep.
Completely tough to gauge.
Good point. But if you're like a filament manufacturer and you go to the Midwest Rip Rap Festival, you can measure how much filament you sold at the event. And like, there's ways of tracking this. Like, you can have certain QR codes or UTM parameters in your links when you hand out flyers or whatever. That kind of thing is a way that you can indicate it. So there's ways, right? There's still ways to track it, but just know that inherently events are very tricky to kind of wrap your head around. You might have to say, yeah, it might look like on the books we lost money doing this, but it still might make sense to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of times when Steve and I are at an event and we get back and we go, that was fun. We're not sure if it was worth Opulo's $1.
Right. Yep.
So it's like planting a seed. You just don't know what that's going to bear.
Yeah. So there's kind of like, I've broken it out into like 3 broad groups of like why it's beneficial in order of least beneficial to most beneficial, in my opinion. And fight me on this if you don't agree with this order. The first is that it gets the word out about what you're doing. You think this is kind of the whole reason why you go to an event, but it turns out this is actually one of the lower priority things, because this is like one of the most inefficient ways to tell people about what you're doing.
Right.
Like, I don't have to spend any extra time in order to inform someone about the LumenPnP when they click on a YouTube video. That just happens.
And you probably get the impressions we'd gain from some of our events in a single video.
I think by an order of magnitude over time. Yeah. Like, the amount of people I can talk to in a day is not high in comparison to I launch a YouTube video and tens of thousands of people could see it.
Yeah,
I pay for ads.
That's hundreds of hours of people learning about LumenPnP.
Exactly. Like, there is, and of course, that's coming from the benefit of having an avenue where people can see that, which is not everyone's situation, but you can pay for those eyes. That's an ad. There's other ways. You can just start making YouTube videos. That's still a lot. Or other kinds of social media, advertising, other ways of telling people about it. Just having people be aware of it. This is not necessarily the best way to do it. but it's still something, right? Like you said, there are still people that come up to us 2 years later, like, hey, I met you at this thing. That can be beneficial.
And getting the word out, it also builds legitimacy.
Yeah. Like if you're at an event I think there's something to be said for like, oh, they're here. That adds some validity to you as an organization. If you show up, it means something. Yeah. If you were at, let's say, CES 3 years in a row and that fourth year you're not there, well, what does that mean?
It's like, oh, they can't afford to be here.
Yeah.
And like maybe that's totally untrue.
Mm-hmm. But that perception is a lot of it, So all things to think about there. Yeah. So that's another benefit is like, public perception. Another huge thing is media coverage. So a lot of people go to events and make YouTube videos. They walk around with a camera and they just look for something interesting and they make content about it. And like, it depends greatly on the event for sure. But there's usually some kind of media coverage, either YouTubers doing stuff, literal just press doing it, the event itself making media about the event. There's a lot of great press that comes from that. Some early press that was really helpful for me was like, I would go to Maker Faire and I'd bring flamethrowers and a flamethrower is a great picture. And they would take a bunch of pictures of that. And then that became a lot of press media for Maker Faire. And that was great. That was great for exposure for me that then led into Opulo. But, that's huge. But the photographer who took all those pictures, her and I became friends. And she would see me at later events and be like, hey, Steve, let's do another flamethrower picture. That was great. That was great for reach. So, the event itself will do that media and push that media as well.
Yeah, we probably got interviewed a dozen times across the 5 or so events we've been at.
Yeah.
Is that about right?
I would say so. Yeah. A couple YouTube, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 videos for different YouTube channels. That was really helpful for us. Like a lot of value in that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge part of it. Just content that comes out of these events. It is a perfect opportunity for content to be generated. Be part of that. Be something that people are looking at that event. It's really hard at like CES. Like, oof. You got to be the spiciest thing at that event to make it on some of the reels. Like you got to be the new post office truck that looks like a weird cartoon alligator to be in the, you can see that
no, I don't know what you mean.
Wow. That I must sound insane.
Yeah. Yes.
The new post office truck, the new like delivery vehicle for the post office looks wild. Because it needs to fit a very specific set of requirements of like the hood needs to be X amount low and like a very tall person needs to be able to stand up in the back. It looks wild. And that would debut at CES. And it was what everyone was talking about that year at CES because it looked wild. It was so goofy. And like it's cool and it needs to be that way for many reasons. But at a big event like CES, you got to be the wacky truck to be the thing people talk about, right? So
I'm familiar with the truck, but the cartoon alligator threw me.
Yeah. I did not go into that in a way that was conducive towards understanding.
Yeah.
But so like, be aware of like, what are people going to take away from it? If you're going to CES and you have a small little demo that is not big and flashy, media coverage is probably not going to be part of your consideration here.
Yeah. And another great part about attending events is just meeting interesting people.
Yeah.
Like what Steven said up top, you're not going to know who's going to be there.
Yeah.
But if you go in with an open mind, you can have some really cool collaboration opportunities arise from it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And in many different ways, like collaborating with other businesses that are doing something similar, finding people that are looking for work that you could have on for contracts or full-time hires. Like we've had hiring opportunities come out of like different people that were looking for work. That stuff has come out of events. Talking business, like there have been some events where we've gone to where we've just sat down with other open source maintainers and talked about an actual literal thing to get included into a piece of open source software.
Yeah.
It's opportunities to talk to these people and how do you deal with blah, 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 blah. And then you just get the download on their experience. And it's so helpful. It's so helpful, especially at after parties. Mm-hmm. If you have the ability to throw an after party, throw an after party. You can get some people to come. It's great. It's such a good way to learn a bunch of stuff and just have a bunch of people hanging out.
Our regular attendance at like all the East Coast and Midwest rap festivals is how we built such a good relationship with one of our vendors, LDO. Mm-hmm. That's been instrumental in us like really getting the LumenPnP supply chain as robust as it is.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's been good. There's a lot of really good stuff that comes out of that, but particularly it's that stuff that like the meeting interesting people, I think is probably the most valuable part of it, but it's also the one that you can put an ROI value to the least. Because it's just like, wow, it's really beneficial to know this person. That's not a money-making thing. That's just like, you should do it. In the Eisenhower matrix, it's important and not urgent. It's like stuff that isn't like immediately obvious why it's beneficial, but it's really good to do.
Mm-hmm. And then one at Murph, I think it was, we became best buddies with Chris from CNC Labs.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's been on the podcast?
Yeah. We love him.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be mean to him. I can't equate dollars to my friendship with Chris.
Yeah, exactly. That's
sorry,
just,
Chris.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
Like there is so much benefit and value. Not only just Chris being an absolute gem and a good friend, but like just having the experience of knowing him. Like that's invaluable, and we wouldn't have had that experience otherwise. And like even going to events of like I go to Open Sauce every year now, and this applies more for like the YouTube game of like talking to a bunch of other YouTubers. So valuable to just hang out and drink a beer with a bunch of other people doing YouTube and being like, what's your guys' experience with this? Oh, it's so nice.
Yeah.
That's the real value of events, is going to these things and talking with these other people. It's fun walking the floor and seeing all the other stuff. Talking with other people doing something similar, that's the reason to go to them, in my opinion.
Yeah, my experience has been much more around the maker fairs and rep fests. And for those, the events are more valuable when like it's closing time and the public's left and it's just all the vendors hanging out.
Yeah, exactly. Also, this changes a ton depending on your industry. So this is just us talking, and we've been to electronics events. We've been to Rep 3D printer events. We've been to maker fairs. That's the kind of stuff that we've attended. I know after talking with Chris, a lot of Chris from CNC Labs, CNC Machine, the long mill, like they go to woodworking events and they sell machines at the event. We don't usually. That's just not how our customer will think about things. So for us, the value is meeting people. For a lot of people, they move units at the event. They set up contracts at the event. They take meetings at the event. Sometimes a lot of their business literally comes from going to events. I know that a lot of CEOs will go to software events and they do 80% of the business for their company in a year from them just going to an event.
That's crazy.
It's wild. So like, take everything we're saying with a grain of salt. We are a very specific niche hardware thing that who knows how your industry plays out. If you're a home automation product, there might be 3 events that you go to a year and that spurns on 70% of your business.
Mm-hmm.
So just, it might be very different for you. This is just our experience on how this can be valuable. You can make a lot of money going to the events. You will make sales going to events. That's just not how it works for us.
Yeah. So like CNC Labs goes to a woodworking show. We've been urged to go to PCB vending shows. Like how do you pick events basically?
Yeah. Which ones do you even think about attending?
And for us, we're still feeling it out. It's a little bit of guesswork and it's a little bit of like, not gambling, but
it's always kind of a gamble, right?
Yeah.
Like because you don't have the ROI, you're kind of always guessing. You kind of have to go to know. Each event has a different vibe.
Like we went to a maker fair one year and we weren't sure if anyone would care about us at all.
Yeah.
Like it was a kids themed event, but a lot of good came out of it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It was more about the parents that were showing their kids around, checking out the table for us.
Yep. Yeah. I think we got some conversion on that. We didn't really learn a lot about like our potential customer there. We met some interesting people, but it was all right.
Yeah.
Like we learned a lot going to it. I don't know if we'd go to it again.
It was a good practice run for like a bigger maker fair.
I think so. Yeah. It was a pretty small maker fair. And it was sufficiently far enough away that it probably wouldn't be worth it to go again. But yeah, it depends on the maker fair. For us, I don't know if it's really worth it. Like going more specific electronics manufacturing-y is probably a little bit more worthwhile.
We definitely went with an open mind that anything could happen, which you always need to do when attending an event. But it's also fair to see an event as a shakedown for something larger you're going to be at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steven, why don't we take a quick ad break?
And I'd like to thank this episode's sponsor, PCBWay. PCBWay makes excellent PCBs that we use for all of our prototyping here at Opulo. It's fantastic that I can take my designs, put them on their web portal, and there's an engineer who goes through and reviews all of my designs to make sure I haven't made some kind of silly mistake before they put it out to fab. And then I have excellent PCBs within a week in hand that we can use for testing our designs and moving forward from there that we can toss on the LumenPnP and populate all of our boards. If you're looking for a board shop, I highly recommend PCBWay. Thank you so much to PCBWay for sponsoring this episode.
Yeah, because I think we were going to either IRF or Electronica thereafter, something like that.
Right.
Those are both other great ones we should talk about here.
Yeah, let's talk about IRF and Murph, because those are other ones that we've gone to in the past, and we haven't tabled that in a while, but we have a presence at usually.
Yeah. That sounds great. So Midwest RepRap Festival, RepRap being like 3D printers that self-replicate.
Yep.
Earth, East Coast, now called 3D Printtopia.
Yeah.
We've attended both as people and as a company, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Strangely, it's all 3D printing nerds and like DIY people, but there's not a lot of like circuit board makers there.
Yeah.
Like, it's people who appreciate a circuit board, but it's not circuit board designers really. Like,
and just like you were saying, that's a great example of a tangential market.
Yeah.
Where like a lot of people there still make circuit boards. They're makers. If you're building a 3D printer, really also thinking about making PCBs. There's some overlap there. Not a ton, but there's some.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely tangent.
Yeah.
You might find that these people are 3D printer nerds by evening time, but like their day job, maybe they're electronics and designers.
Yep.
So you're going to catch them and pull in their interest from that.
Sure. We also go to it to just see what the industry is doing.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of parts in the Lumen are based on 3D printer parts. A lot of them literally are 3D printer parts. What new stuff is coming out? What new way of doing things are people exploring? Like it's also a bit of R&D for engineering for us as well.
Definitely true. Like we keep a close eye on like closed loop NEMA 17s with like a backside shield, or we look at like how people are developing on Clipper. To make like input shaping even more insane.
Sure. Or the linear motors on the Magneto X that came out. Like these kinds of things we want to peep. We want to see what's good and see is there something here that would be beneficial to our machine, to our hardware.
And it's also super fun to go to an event like that and share like what we're good at with people. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have been picking our brains there about like putting cameras on their machines to like calibrate nozzles. And you know what? Opula's pretty good at that.
We've done some camera stuff. Yeah. That's true.
And like we said before, it's an incredible one for partnerships and collabs and just building strong friendships we can lean on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really great for that. That one is less about, I think, selling lumens to people and more about staying up to date with a community of people that will help us continue to develop the next good generation of machines.
Yeah. It's definitely a traveling road show where it's like, feels like 60% the same people, no matter where it is in the world.
Yeah. That event happens in some form or another 5 times around the US or planet. And you end up seeing those people. Like there's the event people that I end up seeing 6 times a year.
Yeah.
Like I just see all the same group. It's great. It's
definitely
fun.
A circuit too.
Yeah, there's a circuit. Yeah. Yep. And then kind of on the other side of it's tangential in a small event because like Earth and Murph or 3D Printtopia as it's called now, they're pretty small. They're not huge events. Like SuperCon, we sponsored SuperCon. That's the Hackaday event. We sponsored that and I go to it, but we never really tabled it. You can't really table at it. There's stuff like that. And like Teardown, which is a crowd supply one in Portland.
Yeah.
We've never been to that, but I'm definitely going next year. Those are small, but in 2022, we went to Electronica, which is huge. It's like 11 football fields worth of airplane hangars of electronics vendors. Silicon manufacturers, PCB manufacturers, silicon fab machine manufacturers, like silicon die cutting, silicon die fabrication, like anything you can think about that has any kind of relationship with PCBs, electronics in any way, they're there.
Yeah, and there multi-million-dollar industries were featured that we hadn't even realized were a part of that supply chain.
Yeah. It's absurd. It was crazy. That was wild. That was huge. That was a tremendously big event. You're not going to catch, it's just going to be a random luck of the dice of who walks up to you, right? Who even makes it to your hangar of the show. Mm-hmm. It's just so big. We maybe got some customers from it, but I think what actually came from that was the most useful was we talked to so many people and we learned about what people in the industry wanted from a desktop pick and place. Like before we went to that event, we're like, oh, the Lumen's for manufacturing. It's for making 500 to 5,000 units a year. This is what it's for. We know what this is. And then we get to Electronica.
And then like a tier 1 automotive company wants to use it for prototyping like infotainment displays.
Yeah. And we're like, no, don't do that. It's not for prototyping. It's not worth setting it up to make 3 boards, to make 5 boards. And they're like, oh, honey, no, our prototyping batch is 500 boards.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh.
We're like, F.
Yeah. They're like, oh, what we've been calling manufacturing this whole time, a ton of people call prototyping. And we just didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's one of those things where like the amount of value that has come out of that realization for now how we talk about the machine, how we market the machine, how we do all kinds of stuff now. It's invaluable that we learned that lesson. Yeah. You cannot assign a number to that. And the amount that it cost us to fly out to Germany and do this whole thing, it's invaluable. Like, you can't have an ROI on that.
I could try to put a number to this. Like,
okay,
we've spent tens of thousands of dollars on marketing since that event.
Yeah.
If that marketing material is slightly less calibrated than it is now, then like we would have had to spend way more money to have the same like efficiency.
Or even people that come to the web store and they see that we say it's good for prototyping. If everything that we said was like, oh, this is good for production, they'd be like, oh, well, I'm not in manufacturing. This doesn't really look like it's going to fit for me then, or whatever. Like, what percentage of sales that we've had wouldn't have converted? Like,
you can't measure it. Yeah.
It's like, it could be a lot. It could be a lot. So that's what we learned. We made a lot of good connections. We learned a lot about who the customer was, and what they wanted, which we'll get into a little bit later. But so yeah, Electronica was a great event, but that's kind of the scale, like from a really, really small, tiny maker fair that's for like families going on the weekends to see some cool projects, all the way to the biggest electronics event in the world that happens every 2 years, being at the very beating heart of the industry. There's benefits to doing both of them. We've had our spread.
It's been a lot of fun.
It's been fun. Yeah. So, that's a bit of the range of what we've experienced. You might find similar things. There might be super small niche things that are worthwhile to go to be part of kind of what's the scuttlebutt? What are people talking about? What's happening right now in this industry and staying on top of it? And then let me talk to customers. Great reasons to go for both.
So when we were at Electronica, we realized that like it was an event hall filled with big, expensive booths, and all of them had meeting rooms.
Yeah.
And it was, for many of these exhibitors, it was more about filling out time slots and taking meetings.
Yeah.
Like we attended a couple of those. It was pretty valuable. Talking to the customers was a little bit more fun than like sitting in a meeting room. Like your results here will totally vary.
Yeah. I think a lot of those conversations that do happen in an event like that are for like, hey, let's make a partnership where I need a widget and you make a widget. Let's strike a deal, and you'll buy 100,000 widgets and I'll make 100,000 widgets, and off we go. And signing big contracts like that kind of energy is really what it feels like those kind of discussions are about, like vetting vendors and getting pricing and stuff like that. And like if we were selling bulk orders of lumens, like, if you could buy 50 of them at a time for building out a workshop or some factory, something like that, maybe that would be what it is. But at our scale, it doesn't make sense yet. I don't think. That's my current take on it. Yeah. I could be wrong, but
it felt like it was more for like meeting with an application engineer from Texas Instruments to talk about like OEM customization.
Right. That was actually some of the chats that we had, was like talking with chip manufacturers of like, hey, here's our application. Would it work? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, maybe it's less about that bulk, that's how it felt to me, but you're totally right. We did talk with a lot of people in that way. It's kind of a big sales event. It's an opportunity to directly talk with people of like, hey, can you solve my problem? And then someone can creatively try and answer it.
Yeah, you could tell there were strange motivations to some of the exhibitors, like people competing to hand out their business card the most.
Yeah.
To hand out the most flyers and brochures.
Right.
Like everyone's goals are not the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Just getting them out does not mean people give a rip or rice-a-roni about it. Like, it just doesn't matter necessarily.
It's so important to stress it for all these event things. Like, make sure you go after like what's important to you.
Yeah. If you see other people doing something weird, don't be like, oh, I guess I have to do that. It's like, if it doesn't make sense, consider it.
Yeah.
But like, if it doesn't make sense, okay, it doesn't make sense for you.
At Electronica, there was one exhibitor.
Yeah.
They just had a model race car and they had you drive it. And like, they were happy to have you walk away from the table having just drove the car.
Do you remember what they were selling?
No.
So like, either it was a bad demo or you were not even remotely their target audience. Cause like,
and they just let me leave.
Well, yeah. Or yeah. Cause they didn't care. And like the person they're actually trying to sell it to is someone who's deeply invested in like immersion racing rigs. And they're going to be very attentive to the software. They're gonna be like, oh, is this running bloobity blop? And they'll be like, no, it's zoobity zorp. And they're like, oh, cool, let's talk. That would be the thread. And you're the prop in the background showing it off while they do the business deal. Like maybe that's what it is, but who knows? I mean, like, who knows why they made that decision to have that be their booth? It's wild.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
And another whole thing to consider here is like, when it comes to events is, do you actually need to go as a company or can you just walk the floor and see 80% the same benefit, maybe even more benefit? Like, do you want to be tied down to a booth or do you want to be like a free agent that can just walk around and have no obligations.
Totally. We tabled at IRF, and that was really beneficial that one year. But you've been going ever since just to kind of get the lay of the land. And it's been nice not having a booth because we can walk around and see what's there. Again, what's the benefit of doing it? If you're trying to talk to customers, you should probably have a booth because it's a place where people can come up and find you. If you're trying to learn about the industry, you should walk around so you're not tied down. You should see what other stuff is there. It's a pretty good way to determine whether or not you should go. I was at OpenSauce OpenSauce is really probably not the best event to bring a Lumen to in terms of making sales. Like it might be some, but it's very similar to Maker Faire in that way. The creators could set up a machine somewhere. I just set up a Lumen there and I didn't have to watch it. I could just let it sit. And that was great because people could still see that it was there, but I didn't have to babysit it. I could go around and talk to people. I could make connections. I could collaborate with people on stuff. That was great. That was perfect. But if we had a booth there, okay, now you're kind of tied down. You don't get to do as much exploration and communication in connections with people, much less of that. So yeah, that's a big question.
For me personally, I'm pretty extroverted, so I don't mind going up to a table and saying hi, introducing myself.
Yeah.
But I do think it's easier to get a relationship going quickly with like a new friend if they're walking up to you when you're in front of your shtick.
Yeah. Like, that's a great point. That's a good corollary to this.
Like if I'm in front of a Lumen or next to the Lumen and someone approaches me, I have such an easier time explaining it, telling someone about what we do and like why it's important than I would if I'm walking up to their table and just trying to like shove this info.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Lucian. Want to hear about my pick and place?
Yeah, exactly.
Like very different energy.
Yeah. So like people coming to you versus you going to them.
Yeah.
Totally different dichotomy.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a super good point. Yeah.
So you just have to decide like what's good enough for you there.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, what's the cost of tabling? Because some events it's free to table. Some events it costs some money. Some events it costs an obscene amount of money. It could be worth it. It just depends on what you're doing, like, and it's okay to only do the cheaper ones or the free ones to start. And then when you can do the big ones, the only reason we were even able to do Electronica was because Elector sponsored us to be there. I don't know if we would have gone otherwise. I highly doubt we would have gone otherwise.
Yeah.
If they had not sponsored our booth. So there's a lot of the money is a big consideration of this too. It's a lot cheaper to get a day pass than it is to get a booth in most of these events.
My friend Christian Reed from Recon Tools on LinkedIn had this crazy post saying it took $100,000 to have a booth at CES.
Yeah.
And they had like a 20-foot by 20-foot area with like construction scaffolding and like a couple different demos you could walk up to. So like this stuff is not cheap.
It's not cheap. And we'll talk about this later, but I used to work in this industry.
Yeah.
And it's obscene. It's crazy. Yeah.
In that light, like just the ROI is going to be rather unknown, like we keep saying here. So just need to go into like an inkling of it being worth it.
Yeah. I'd say once you get back from an event, have a little postmortem about it. Like everyone that went to the event, sit down and be like, did we feel like that was worth it? And like realistically, that might be as tangible of output data as you get for these events.
Yeah.
Like when we get into like specifically how to table and stuff in just a minute here, there's things you can do to have a little bit more hardcore data about that, but it might just be vibes. Like you might be going off vibes. Yeah, we learned a ton. It was really useful. I wish I had more time to talk to these people because now I'm going to change how I do things. That's a sign to go back. It was all right. There was some cool stuff. That's a sign to not.
Yeah.
It's like if you didn't feel like you learned stuff, you didn't feel like you moved product, don't go back. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your money. There's a huge opportunity cost to go to these things.
Yeah.
There's so much time that goes into setting this stuff up. It's just, if you don't see it, stop going.
Yeah.
Stop going.
Don't drag yourself to an event you don't want to be at.
Yeah.
Don't let it feel performative and obligatory.
Right. Yep. Yeah. It's really got to make sense.
But like, let's say it does make sense. How do you do it, Steven?
Yeah. So, quick context. Right out of school, I worked for a company called Deep Local, which did a lot of event production. We would do like, instead of like making TV ads or billboards, we were technically an advertising firm, but we wouldn't do that stuff. We would make robots. So companies would hire us to build robots, and then we would bring them to events, and then we would show them off at the events, and it was advertising for them.
In like an interactive demo kind of way, right?
Yes. We would also do stuff like the classic example of what they did is there was a thing we made for Netflix called the Netflix button. And it was a little wooden box with a red button on the top. It's very nondescript. And you press the button and it would silence your phone, dim your lights, turn on your TV, open Netflix, and order a pizza to your house. and it was the Netflix and chill button.
I need one of those.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
And we never sold it, but it got like 2.2 billion social media impressions for Netflix. That's what they paid for, was the social media impression. They made socks that when you fall asleep, they detect you fall asleep and it pauses your Netflix show. So it doesn't burn through the next 3 episodes before it asks if you're still watching. That kind of stuff. It was a creative, interesting marketing thing. And sometimes instead of being like a social media campaign, it would be an actual event. So we'd bring these robots to events. And my job was half coming up with the idea and then half building the thing and bringing it on site and like demoing it at events. So I've been to so many events all over the world, demoing at like Google I/O, Zeitgeist, CES so many times. I've been to so many different events all over the place.
Guys, this is like 7 years ago, and I still think he has some miles squared away from all this travel.
Yeah, I went around the world 3.5 times in terms of distance, like flying in 6 months. Like I flew.
Steven does events.
I did events. Yeah, at that first year, literally just under 50% of the time I was traveling. And then the other half I was in my apartment. I made a joke. I should have only paid for half my rent because I was only there half the time. But anyway, my point here is this is a huge industry. This company that I worked for, all we did was this. And the amount of the budget that they would have for like literally a 2-day event to pay a huge team of engineers to build this thing and go out and support it all over the place, flights and next day shipping, blah, 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 like crazy stuff. The events can be insane.
Right.
So don't worry about this yet. Like you can get to this point where you do these big, wild, crazy things if you ever feel like it, but like, it's okay to just have a booth. Yeah. Part of the reason why I want to bring up all this crazy stuff is that out of all the time that I was there, I have tabled so many times. I've talked to so many people at an event representing some Google or Android or whatever else it was. Having something be interactive is the number one thing you can do for tabling. That was just so incredible. Having something where people can go up and experience it. They can have a takeaway. Something comes away from the event at the booth. It doesn't have to be big and bombastic. If they have that experience, that's what they're going to remember. I did X at this event. Check out this cool thing I got from X at this event.
Yeah, this robot drew me, whatever.
Yes, of which there were many of those. But yeah, that kind of thing for sure. This also goes to say demos are risky, but they're very necessary. You should do them. Demos are great. They show your thing working. Mm-hmm. They provide proof that it works. They're incredibly risky.
Yeah.
There's a joke about live demos.
Yeah. What they're precarious.
They always go wrong.
Yeah. Seeing Steven build a demo is like, he gets militant about it.
There are rules about when you have a incredibly large contract at a very high profile event, failure is literally not an option. You have to do it right. You have to have backups. You have to have a secondary plan. It doesn't matter how expensive it is. Like we would do crazy stuff to make sure things went well.
You guys would ensure like the show must go on at all costs. And even if that meant like sending someone out of town for like a round trip flight same day.
That has happened before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like to deliver a single package, like you do what you have to do.
And I think all of this sounds pretty intimidating, especially for like our audience of just like tiny little hardware enthusiasts that might have an entrepreneurial endeavor. And like, you don't have to go this hard, as Steven's saying.
Yeah, exactly. Like take 5% of this.
Yeah.
Take this is very important because this is how people view what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And that should not be taken lightly. When you're handling perception of this thing, you need to be incredibly aware of every part of it. And yeah, it was pretty militant when you're talking about Google. Like it's going to be a different tier of strictness, but it can't hurt to take that same ethos and apply it to what you do. Maybe with a little less stress is okay. So
breathe, buddy, breathe.
Breathe, buddy, breathe. Yeah. So some things that you can take away from it that aren't quite as intense is have a lot of backups.
Mm-hmm.
When we'd bring demos, I brought this robot that would play rock, paper, scissors with you to Japan. We needed to have one of them running. We brought 5 because if 4 went down, we needed to have an extra one. Like you just don't play around with it. Yeah. That's a little much, but okay. So what is your backup? Do we have some spare parts? Okay. What are the most intense spare parts? Like what are the things we cannot manifest at this event? Okay. We should have a backup controller. We should have a backup motherboard.
Mm-hmm.
If it breaks in transit or whatever, what's your backup plan? Do you have someone back at home that could next day air you one if you really needed it? What's that backup plan?
Yeah.
Figure all that stuff out.
So like bringing extras of everything is cool, but like making sure your stuff doesn't break on the way there is like super the way to go.
Yes.
And for us, that means Pelican case, Pelican case, Pelican case.
Yeah, we have a lot of Pelican cases. There's a place close by to Pittsburgh that, I don't know, once every couple months, they have this huge sale of like old military Pelican cases that they sell for a pretty good price. And I usually buy a couple when they do it. I think I own 5 Pelican cases now, and they're pretty good price. And if y'all aren't familiar, it's like a huge plastic case that is indestructible.
Yeah, they're like bomb proof.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're really, really good. Get those for moving your stuff around.
Mm-hmm.
They're useful. Also, when you land, if you're flying, if you had it in check luggage or whatever, I made this mistake one time. We were doing an event in India and we got our Pelican cases and I didn't open them until we got to the venue and stuff was broken. And if I had opened them as soon as I got the Pelican cases from security, from check luggage, the carousel, and I had looked, I would have known and I could have stayed up all night and fixed it. But I didn't. So I had to fix it live like 20 minutes before the event.
Oh, that's rough.
It was really bad. You want to de-risk that stuff as soon as possible. Again, this is a very intense perspective here. I'm coming from a very intense perspective. You just solve these problems. Don't deal with, oh no, my thing's broken and I don't have my workshop here to fix it. Like, get good padding, get a good case, check your stuff as soon as you land or, get your cat back from the plane.
The less you put your faith in the hands of others, the better.
Yes. Control the situation, control the system as much as possible.
Like, have everyone fly over their company t-shirt in their backpack. Have the bare minimum to do a table of a handout if your check luggage got lost or destroyed.
Yep.
It's not a time to be trusting.
Yes. Yeah. Trying to own as much of this as you can, if possible.
We always talk about bringing a 3D printer with us in case we have to replace like a broken Lumen part.
Exactly. Yeah. Positron would be a great thing for that. That would be perfect.
I wish.
Yeah. Also, I usually feel that it is better to do the demo that is 70% cool and have it run really well than do the demo that's 100% cool and have it fail partway through. If you have a demo that is 100% cool, like the super cool thing, put that in a YouTube video and link people to it where they can watch the curated thing of the demo that's a little more spicy and a little bit more up in the air.
Yeah. And like Steve and I, we had an interesting interplay about this once. When we were at Electronica, it was probably like a year before we started selling feeders.
Oh,
and we had a prototype feeder with us to show people. And I was like, Steven, can we please just bodge it in?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I remembered that. Yeah, we were sitting at the booth and you're like, it would be really cool if we showed the feeder running. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow, this is a great example for this. And you were like, yeah, it'd be really cool if we could show the feeder running at the event.
But and there was like 200 engineering hours to go before feeders were like saleable at least.
Yeah. And it was possible to bodge it in, but it was also possible that bodging it in would mess with the firmware in a way that made the whole Lumen not work very well.
And probably in a way you wouldn't have recovered at the event.
Yeah. Or like it would have been, it would have failed in front of people. Yeah. It wouldn't have been tested. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you got to send it and just do something like that if you have no other choice. But if you have a choice, it was fine. We had a button on the feeder where you could press it and it would feed. And it was like, we're working on adding features in. I don't think that deterred from anyone's experience, but it would have if we showed it working and it stunk. Because if you see it feed from the machine, it's like, well, now pick from it. We didn't have that in OpenPnP either. So it was like, okay, where's the balance? So yeah, that's a great example of that. It's okay if it's not fully there yet. Have the thing that you know is going to run really well.
Yeah. Because people have pretty good imaginations. They can imagine the next step past like what your machine is doing on display. But if they leave watching your machine crash and go, they're going to remember that more.
That's what they saw. Yeah. That's a great example. Yeah. And make them interactive if possible. What we do, one of our demos that we did for a lot of events was we literally ran a full SMT line on our table.
It's super fun.
It was really cool. We had a stencil jig and people could stencil solder paste across on a board. They'd load it into Lumen. They'd like hit go on OpenPnP and the Lumen would run its job. And then they could put it into the reflow oven and hit the button and it would reflow the board. And then that was a takeaway. It was actually a little PCB that would light up.
Mm-hmm.
And people built their own PCB at our booth and got it as a takeaway. It was interactive and there was a takeaway.
And we're showing that you can fit an SMT line in a 4x8 table.
Yeah.
Or 3x8 table.
Yeah.
Tiny.
Super small. Yeah. I was really happy with that because not only does it literally show the thing running and doing the thing and how easy it is, you get to do it and you have something that you take with you showing that it did that.
Yeah.
Like that's perfect. That checks all the boxes. So try and make it interactive, try and have a takeaway. Mm-hmm. And when I say a takeaway, I mean like a cool little gizmo representation of what you do. That's different from a handout or a pamphlet.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing. And you made a miracle happen at Electronica about this.
Oh my God. Yeah. We realized every other table around us had a handout.
Yeah.
And we're like, where's our handout? We were just having to hope that people would scan this QR code and on our laptop, and it was fraught.
Yeah.
So we manifested a printout.
You manifested.
Yeah. At this beautiful print shop and attached to the trade show because they're used to people having these types of emergencies.
Yeah. They printed money that week.
Oh, yeah. But it's all to say, have a little fact sheet, product brochure, like the bog standard thing that anyone would expect you to give them.
Right.
It's a standard.
It is a standard thing because people would be like, do you have a little handout? And on the first day we were like, no, scan the QR code. A tab on someone's phone is so much more ephemeral than a piece of actual literal paper they need to bring home with them. And when you get home from an event, anyone that's been to events like this, inevitably your back left pocket fills up with these little things and you dump it out and you go and you clean through and okay, what did I get from the event? Let me go through all these things. That's way more sticky in a person's life than a tab on a phone.
Yeah, I lose half the ones I open.
Yeah. Yeah. So have a handout. People expect it. You should do it. That and a takeaway is ideal. Like we had a pamphlet and then we also had the PCBs that we were making. That worked really well.
And if you want to take it a step further, have a discount code on it.
Yep.
Make them, if you want to go even crazier, make them unique. You could track conversions.
Mm-hmm. And that's a way that when you get back from the event, you can be like, well, look how many converted. Look how effective this was.
Exactly.
That's great. And you can, how many did we hand out? How many actually went to this link? Now you have a click-through rate effectively. Yep. Like you can do that kind of thing. So that's good.
Yeah. One of the most important things about attending events is to like have your spiel refined. You need to know what you're saying. You need to know your key metrics. You need to know what people are there to hear you say.
Yes.
It has to be practiced, rehearsed, aligned with all your other teammates there.
Yes. Everyone has to be on the same page about what you say.
Yeah.
Especially for the tricky stuff.
Yeah.
When it's like, well, what about X? Like if you get any gotcha questions, if you get any things that like the really challenging, tricky things, make sure that you know how you're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Make sure you know, like before, a great example of this is when we tabled at a lot of events, we did not officially have support for 0402, but a lot of people in the community were using it for 0402. I was a big stickler about, I had to see some crazy definitive proof before we marketed it that way, but people were doing it. Like we knew it was fine. How do you convey that in a way that is not misleading, that is accurate, but also is not going to send people down a path of hardship?
Yeah. So we had to get really aligned on what's the edge of what we're willing to say. Like,
how do we talk about it? Yeah.
I think for that one, we were like, yeah, we have settings in beta. Many people are already using it fine.
Yes. We expect without a hardware update to be able to get there with some settings tweaks, whatever it was, right? I forget exactly what we said at the time, but you should all be on the same page because if someone talks to two different people at the event or like, you don't want to be saying different information. You will have to be aligned on that.
And
have a spiel.
And everyone at your booth needs to know the industry terms.
Yeah.
If I didn't know what like a QFN part is and the person I'm talking to can tell, I look like a clown.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone should have at least some bare understanding there. So like have that information together, even practice being a random person coming up to a booth and asking questions. Like tabling is a whole thing about how do you handle these kinds of communications. It's a lot, but go through getting used to talking about the stuff that you have to say about these specifics. Have it down. If someone's like, what's this? Be ready to launch into a bit.
Yeah. Like it felt for me that each conversation was like 60% the same.
Yeah.
So there's rails here.
Yeah. And it's also very okay to have someone ask a question and be like, I don't know. I'll have to check with our engineering team. That's a great question. I'm not sure. Let me ask.
Yeah. Can I take your email? I'll follow up with you.
Exactly. Now you got their email.
Email.
Yeah.
But the spiel is incredibly important. You are representing your product, your company.
You need to know how to say it in a way that everyone's on the same page with. Also, when you are there, every hour that you're there, you're trying to optimize for as much interaction during that time as possible. So what you don't want is to be sitting there at a booth, twiddling your thumbs, and no one's talking to you. No one's coming up to your booth. There's a couple things that after doing a lot of this that I found works really well for trying to bring people in. One is kind of an interesting approach for seeding a crowd. It's very similar to the idea of like if you go to a coffee shop and there's a tip jar and there's no money in it, people are less likely to put money in than if there's already a few bucks in there. So you can do this with your booth. If you're walking through an event and you see someone sitting there staring out at the crowd and there's no one there, that's actually a little intimidating because it feels like if you walk up, now it's just me and them.
Yeah.
It's a one-on-one conversation. Now I'm committing myself to talking with this person a whole bunch. That's actually a little spooky. And whether you realize it or not, you're going to lean away from walking up to someone that's just sitting there empty. You can seed an audience. So even if it's just one person that's at the booth with you, you have them stand on the other side of the booth and you just talk to them that way. Even if you're talking about what you're going to have for lunch, it doesn't matter. You should change the topic if someone walks up, but that feels way more comfortable to come in and just listen because there's no social obligation. You come up, you're just listening to a conversation, you're looking at what's on the table. Maybe you want to chime in, but also it's very acceptable to just keep moving if you don't want to continue. Seating the crowd is great.
Yeah.
You will notice that if there's no one there, it will stay that way. If there's already a little crowd, the crowd gets big. Like, it's great. And then also you can match your volume to match the size of the crowd. Then someone's talking very loud to a very big group. Even more people are going to come over. Once you get that kernel, it can just continue to expand.
I noticed at Electronica, a lot of the exhibitors would stand 5 feet in front of their table with a clipboard or a widget, and they'd pull you into usher conversation. They're fishing for people to help seed that crowd with.
Yes. And that's a way to do it too. I find that's a bit much. If it works for you, great. Have someone out there fishing, trying to pull people in. Usually to me, that feels a little bit more of that person doesn't really want to have that conversation. Yeah, you feel a little guilted.
It felt forced. And I saw a lot of the time where the person's looking for a good social out to step away after being fished.
Yes. So it might work for you. There's a reason they do it, I'm sure. But something that works really well, at least in my experience, is when people are walking by, just smile at them and say hi. Because if you say, do you want to hear about blah, 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 blah? Okay, now there's social pressure. Yeah. But if you just say hi, they can just look at you and go, hi, and keep walking. And that's fine. But if they want to come over and see, you've now given them almost permission. Hi, what are you doing over here? You've already started the conversation. That I found works really well for trying to get people to come over and talk with you about stuff.
That makes a lot of sense. And even just beckoning their eyes over to you again, they're going to be looking at the product on the table and be like, oh, wait, actually, what the hell is that?
Yeah. Yeah. And have you ever seen a pick and place before? You just maybe ask them a little question. It doesn't have to be a big, so this is the LumenPnP, blah, 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 blah. Pump the brakes, buddy. You're just having a chat with another person. It doesn't have to be this whole thing. So yeah, that's just something that can be very useful, trying to seed groups of people.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. And if you meet interesting people, have a way to keep in touch with them.
Yeah, having something that you can give someone if they're like, how can I get in touch with you? How can I talk with you more? Having a step beyond the pamphlet where you can just keep a couple dozen business cards in your back pocket, hand them out to people so that they can hit you up and you guys can chat later. That's what I think business cards are really beneficial for, is being able to just, I know we don't have time to talk now. Here's a place for us to just meet a lot of people. We can follow up later. Have a bunch of business cards in your back pocket. Do not forget them. It is very important to have those.
Yeah. If I'm giving someone a pamphlet plus my business card, to me, I feel like I'm giving them a fast pass to the company's attention.
Yeah. That's a great way to say it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it lets them feel like a bit of an insider, or they know they have a care person on the inside.
Right.
They're not just looking at the entity of Opula on the website. They know they can go Lucian email address.
There's a person there. It was handed to them by that person.
Yeah. They were invited to use this.
Yeah. They don't feel pressured or feel weird about emailing you. It's they were given your email.
Yeah.
Yep. It's very good. It's also a fantastic little place to write stuff down. If you have a pen on you, we're super, super annoying because all our business cards are actually PCBs. So this doesn't really work with us. But if you're a normal person and you have a business card, it's also a great little place to write down notes. It's a great little place to write, oh, you would love blah, blah, blah. You should check this out. And you put the little thing on there. And now that person looks at your business card and they go, oh, Steven from Opula told me about Key Canvas, this really cool web project to view KiCad in browser. Awesome. And then off they go and they have that thing and they remember that connection. So don't do what we do. Get a piece of paper as a business card.
And for me too, it helps. I can be a little bit faceblind for people within a half hour of knowing them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just write 2 sentences about the interaction on the back of their card.
Yeah. That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes the card a million times more useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. True. Yeah. That's your connection to that person now.
Yeah. And in writing those 2 sentences, I remember their face. I'm thinking about them.
Yeah, sure. When it's still fresh, you got it. When the table clears out for a second, whip out a pen and just quickly put it down.
So like a business card is one thing that represents you, but another is just making sure the table's pretty. Like you don't need to spend millions of dollars like Google, but like make sure your tablecloth, it doesn't have cat hair on it.
Right.
Make it all clean.
Yes. It has to look excellent. This is literally the time where you are showing off as an organization. If it doesn't look good, that speaks about what you do. You have to present really, really well here.
Right.
No exceptions. You have to do this well. You have to look presentable. Something I see a lot at events is on signs, people will put like paragraphs on signs. I promise you, no one reads that. No one reads them. Yeah. Your sign should have a big CTA, call to action. Come do blah, blah, blah. Check this out. The name of your company and maybe what you do on it. Some pictures and some light headings at most. No one is going to stand there. Like, that's what the pamphlet should be for.
Yeah.
The point of the sign is to bring people in to talk to you. And then they can do more research later. An event is a quick speed dating of businesses. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to tell someone on a speed date about my favorite flavor of Gatorade because that's a little too niche. Instead, you want to hit stuff like first date stuff like I like dogs. Like that's the big header stuff. To get the general idea about what you do, you can talk over text later. You can learn about what favorite flavor Gatorade you have at another time. That's fine. Just give the big points so they get the gist up front.
I like the elevator pitch, basically.
Yes, exactly. You're really just trying to do the big points, the big headers. You can get into the specifics later. That's what the pamphlet's for. They can go on the website and learn that on their own time. You just want elevator pitch stuff. Yeah. Don't write every single little nugget about what you do on your signs.
That makes sense. It's kind of like less is more.
Yes.
Sometimes I even have the notion here of like quit while you're ahead. If you feel like you've had greater interaction with this person, it hasn't gotten like quiet or like slowed down discussion, be like, great talking to you. Let me know if you have any other questions.
Close it out. Yeah. Open it up for, it's like a waiter trying to move tables so they can get more people into the seats. It's like, I'm only here for X number of hours. If it seems like they're starting to lose interest in the conversation, give them the out, like let them go on. It makes space for somebody else and you don't want to have them hang on longer than they want to. Some people will want to chat.
Right. Like, that can be a little awkward.
It can be a bit much, but also it can be good because they help seed crowds. And sometimes they're just fascinated. And like sometimes this results in people that we still stay in contact with because they're just so interested in it. It's like they don't just want to buy this thing. They want to be involved in it as a project. Mm-hmm. So try and spot that if someone really is like kind of hanging on to your booth like that in that way. It might indicate that they're looking for something beyond what most other people are looking for in terms of interacting with you.
Yeah. And like, if you feel like someone in the crowd is like trying to dominate the conversation, and make sure you're giving space for even the quieter people to like talk to you and ask questions.
Yeah, totally. Because some people will be way more engaged and talking a lot more, and ask the people who have been quiet and have just been listening the whole time, do you have any questions? Pull them in a little too, because they might be trying to get a word in edgewise.
And open space for everyone.
Yep.
I know we keep saying everything's important here, but at an event, like it's about the people. Mm-hmm. And that's the attendees. Yeah. It is such a great time to like research more about your customer base, your user base, and like know who these people are.
Yep.
It's one of the more important things of going to an event.
Yep. Yeah. We talked about this at the top of like, we learned that people were interested in using the Lumen for prototyping. And we're like, oh, maybe our whole idea about where this thing is useful is wrong. That came from talking to customers. I remember at the end of the first day, Jaden was with us at this event. And she was like, yeah, people kept saying prototyping. And I remember you and I were like, no, that's weird. And we were like, well, you tell them it's really not for that. And she was like, okay. And then like a couple hours later, she's like, more people said prototyping. And we're like, all right, we're wrong about something here.
Halfway through the day, Steve, we're like, okay, I guess we're prototyping.
Yeah. And then we switched.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the end of that first day, but at some point through the event, we changed our tactic. Totally different vibe. People would come up, we were like, it's meant for prototyping. And they would go, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. And we're like, oh, okay. I guess this is what we're doing now.
And that flip for us was that people were talking about having their technicians hand solder 10 boards for in-house prototyping run. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, I just might as well have the technician spend an hour setting up the machine to make as many prototype boards as we need.
As we could ever need. Yeah. Which we just didn't understand. So I think that this really is the most important part of going to events is like, talk to these people. What do they want from your product? When they come up and they see it, that if you're noticing that 80% of people come up say, well, can it do it, but it's green? Maybe you should think about making it green. That's a really strong signal. If they say, oh, I'd buy it if it's green, you make that thing green immediately. Yeah. Like this is where you start to understand this, when they come to it, they're like, oh, it's ugly or, it looks XYZ. All of the perception that you can get from them, try and pull all this information out. It's so valuable.
Even just in having people build a circuit board at our table, it was really telling to see how they interact with the machine. Did the things we thought were intuitive feel intuitive to them?
Right.
Was the software helpful or confusing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where did they get stuck? Where did they have no issue? Like it's so educational.
It really is, because we are so steeped in the process and how it all works. You need some beginner's mind to kind of bring it back to what truly does need to be smoothed out and like what are people's perception of it. We were too deep into it to have that understanding. You can also ask a lot about who they are and how their organization works. Like I remember asking a lot of people like, what's your job title? What do you do every day? Would you be able to decide to buy this thing or would your boss have to? What's their title? Like understand how things are structured in their organization, and even better, how do they handle the problem that your product's trying to solve right now without your product?
Right.
Does it suck? Is it actually totally fine and you're building a solution in search of a problem? You can find out.
I think you hit the nail on a couple heads there. Like helping to understand your customer archetype, incredibly useful.
Yeah.
Like helps you figure out okay, what 10 different types of people or industries is this product meant for?
Yeah.
There's just, at least for us, like electronica, maker, whatever it is, super, super handy in that one. We had no idea, like we said, prototyping would be useful. We never thought government might want a LumenPnP, right. But okay, here's like a German engineering government worker.
Yeah.
He telling me he needs it. I'm like, okay, wow, didn't expect that, but let's talk.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. That sounds great. We also pulled some archetypes out of like, you are making small quantities in-house for end use. You are a contractor and you need to swap jobs often. You are doing in-house prototyping for an R&D for a very big company and you outsource your final production. Like what are these like common customer archetypes? What are the different modes in which people might use this? This is a great place to learn that kind of thing.
Right. And for like everyone we talk to, everyone has a different process. So figuring out what is the average process and how can our product fit into most people's way of building a circuit board was super helpful.
Right. Yep.
Like
absolutely.
what you were saying earlier.
Yep. This will inform product decisions. If people were like, yeah, we want a pick and place, but they're really loud. We don't want an air compressor in the office. Okay. Quietness is an important, valuable metric to our customers.
Yeah.
Now we know that this is something we need to account for. This goes into your PRD. If you haven't listened to the PRD episode, I recommend you go back and listen to that one. This is the kind of stuff that feeds into the PRD that decides how you make your product because you've talked to people and you know what's important to them. Yeah. That's huge.
And people at Electronica mostly said, oh, the machine's too small. Well, then maybe it's getting bigger.
Maybe we make long boy lumen, then he's big boy.
Yeah.
Yep. And then that's what comes next. But we never heard that. So it's this size.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think we've really ever heard that very much. Sometimes, maybe occasionally.
We could make a big board.
We can make big board.
I think that's a lot about attendees. Talk to them. Don't be afraid. It's not the place to be shy.
Yep. Yeah. If you are despite how YouTube seems to seem, I'm actually introvert. I act very exuberantly, but I recharge being alone. And these events are exhausting.
They kill Steven for a week.
Yeah. I'm nuked because I'm on all day and I have no time to just turn off and just chill. It's just the full Monty, the whole thing. So you want to bring your biggest Energizer bunnies to events. The people that, and Lucian is the best definition of this. You have a nuclear reactor inside of you. You don't run out. I don't know how you do it, but I think it's always better to bring a more boisterous person with less tech knowledge than someone that has a full deep understanding of the machine and doesn't have as much of an exuberant personality. I think that's always a better balance. Because tech talking points can be taught, but personality can't be, right?
Yeah.
Like that is very, very hard to teach, but anyone can learn a couple quick metrics to have a conversation. You know, that's way easier. And if that person doesn't know, they say, oh, let me ask so-and-so. And then you have someone that does. Easy.
The people you want to bring to an event, strong eye contact, comfortable around people, not shy.
Yep. The people who are excited to go.
Yeah.
The people who are like, yeah, this is going to be fun. We're going to talk to a bunch of people. That's what you want.
Yeah. Don't force anyone to come to an event.
Yeah. Yeah. If they don't want to go, it's not going to be good vibes. You want people that are really stoked to the table and are going to output that kind of energy into the world as they're there representing you in the company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A good way to say it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's huge. Bring your Energizer bunnies. If you're an introvert like myself, just prepare to not have any alone time for a while and set aside your next weekend to do absolutely nothing because it's very, very tiresome. You're just going to be chatting the whole time. This is not the time to say no to events. When I go to Open Sauce, there's like parties to go to and stuff. And all I want to do is go back to my hotel room and sleep. And I imagine Lucian, I hear him in my ear and he goes, Steven, don't be a weenie. Go to the event. When are you going to have this opportunity again? It's going to be all a year.
Go to the after party.
Go to the after party. And it's 10:30 and I'm exhausted and I'm 3 hours of sleep behind. I slept for 90 minutes the night before and I get out of my bed and I go to that party because I should. That's what the event's for. That's the time to push yourself, in my opinion. I am not happy about it most of the time, but once you get there, you're in the zone and like, you can always sleep later, rest when you're dead. So yeah. So that's a big part of this. These things are going to be exhausting.
Yeah. It's some amount of FOMO is important. It'll get you to all the touch points you need in the event.
That's great. FOMO will get you where you need to be in an event.
Yeah.
Feel the FOMO, act on the FOMO. For an event, that's perfect.
Yeah. Even for me, though, if an after party is dead, I'll leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't think I'm going to get an interaction or a takeaway that I was hoping for, I don't feel too obligated to stay anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. If you'd rather have that sleep and be more on your game for next day, if there's another place to go to where you're more involved, you're there to make good connections.
Mm-hmm.
Pursue them. That's the point of this event.
Yeah.
Just to go do that kind of thing. It can be really fun. Like some of my favorite memories, doing stuff at Opula is like going to these things and meeting with people. And all I want to do is go to sleep. And like, that's not what's happening. And that's okay. It's fun. It's type 2 fun sometimes where it's fun when looking back, maybe not at the time.
Yeah. Now the after dragging into the after party. That's a tougher sell.
That's pretty hard. I'll go to those sometimes, but oof.
Yeah. The Hardware Summit one is cool. That DJ's house.
Yeah, that one was sick.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have gone to that. I wouldn't have gone to the party before that if without your influence. Like it's good to go to them. They're good connections to make. And then this one's totally random note. This doesn't really fit anywhere, but it's really important.
Steven has trauma he needs to share.
This is from this rule is written in blood. Always get a hardwired Ethernet connection for internet. Do not trust Wi-Fi if it is mission critical. Don't trust Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is fake. Wi-Fi is not a real option unless you have no choice.
It's just light.
It's just... You know that meme where it's like they've played us for absolute fools? What is this nonsense? Like, I feel like we should make one about Wi-Fi. It's like, what is this? Signals moving through the air? They've played us for absolute fools.
Exactly.
Wi-Fi is an invented...
But a wire is immutable.
But a wire is absolute. Like, I'm joking here, only partially. If something truly is mission critical, you should get it hardwired. Power... of course, that's the stupidest thing I've ever said in my life. If you're getting a power drop, get an Ethernet drop too. Ask for one. If it's not mission critical and you can get stuff offline, please bring an offline copy of any online resources that you need. Bring an extra mobile hotspot if you have to have it Wi-Fi. Have your phone plan support a mobile hotspot.
Buy Starlink, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like whatever you need to do. There were so many times where we saw other people at events rely on Wi-Fi. We never did because I learned this lesson early when I was at Evogal. You always get stuff hardwired. You don't play that game. Again, kind of an intense. Yeah. If it's not mission critical, whatever, Wi-Fi is fine. But if it matters, ask for an Ethernet drop from an event. They'll usually be able to facilitate one. If not, bring every Wi-Fi backup plan imaginable. Because there's nothing worse than showing up to an event, the Wi-Fi is bad in such a way that your demo doesn't work and everything is. That is the worst thing. Like, and the reason that this stands apart is because it's one of the one things you cannot plan for and you cannot bring yourself. Like, you can kind of bring a mobile hotspot and stuff, but like this relies on the venue.
Yeah.
Ask for an Ethernet drop if you can get it. If not, bring backup plans. Because this is the one thing, this is the one weird thing that you can't control when you're demoing. Try and facilitate it. Try and make backups for it if possible. Everything else you can bring with you. It's your controlled system. This is the one exception. So yeah, kind of a random closing note here, but like I've had times where I couldn't get an Ethernet drop and it was hell, especially in an event where it's an RF cacophony. It's a nightmare. It's such a mess. Just get Hardwire if you can. Anyway, that's the end of my tirade about this.
I hope y'all learned something.
Yeah.
Okay, Steven.
It's going to be all right.
Wi-Fi can't hurt you here.
I only ever hardwire. Whenever I do talking to someone on an interview, some live thing or whatever, I have a hardwired Ethernet right behind me. So when I sit here, I can hardwire in. It's messed me up. I will not Wi-Fi if it's critical. I won't do it. I don't trust it.
Wi-Fi can't hurt you.
It can, Lucian. It can.
All right, folks, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for listening, as always. Don't forget to leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps us out a ton. You can find Opula on Twitter and Instagram, and you can also email us at podcast@opulo.io with questions or comments on the episode. Don't forget to check out opulo.io and sign up for our newsletter where we write blog posts and do customer interviews with other folks building open hardware. That's it, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
That's a little weird to get into on a first date. I'm hitting the big points. I like dogs. I don't know. What do you say on a first date? Cut all this.
Keep it.